Hello YouTube, thought I'd do a quick video on how to remove the transmit receive module circuit board from the Retevis RT97 GMRS repeater. And you may ask yourself, well, why would I need to do this? Maybe because you have to repair it, or maybe because you want to modify it. Whatever the case is, this is a video on how to remove it and disassemble it. So now, there's a couple tools you're going to need. You're going to need a Allen wrench. This is an H5. This is to remove the 4 big, which I've already have them removed, but to remove the 4 Allen wrench screws. There's 4 of them. You're also going to need a Phillips screwdriver. And probably an open end wrench. This is going to be 5/16. This is to get the SMA connectors loose. You're also going to need a black marker, and I'll explain why in a little bit. And you're also going to need thermal paste. I'll post a link to this thermal paste in the description below. I'll explain what this is a little bit later in the video, but you're going to need this. After you get the 4 screws removed and you're going to flip open the cover, make sure you be careful. There is a cable we got to disconnect. You cannot open the cover all the way. There is a cable that's got to be disconnected, and I'm going to try to show you this, hopefully. Okay, so what you do, and there might be some silicone on it, you might have to scrape away. This plug unplugs, and you want to take a black marker and put 2 dots on it so you know which way the plug goes. Usually the plug only plugs in one way, but if you mark it this way, you know. So you want to unplug this so we can set the cover all the way down. Now we're going to slide this back, and I'm not going to bore you with me taking screws out and all that stuff. But what I'm going to do next is I'm going to remove the SMA connectors. We have another ribbon cable that we have to mark. This one goes to the power supply. There's going to be silicone on it. You might have to take it off. We're going to, like I said, we have to mark it and unplug it. Also, before you start taking anything apart, take your black marker and mark which one is the low, which side is the low, and which side's the high. And that's easy to do. You can trace the cables back. So make sure you do that before you start unscrewing these cables. The big Phillips screws, one here and one down here. After you remove these cables and unplug this ribbon cable, this whole metal box will come out. And then, when it's out, you take the little screws off, and then that will take the cover off. But I'm going to show you something underneath here to let you be aware of before you pull those little screws out. So I'm going to put you on pause, and we'll be right back. Okay, now I don't want to bore you by taking a video, you watching me taking screws out. So I'm going to pause it when it comes to actually taking it apart. Now I removed the big Phillips screws, like I said, one here and one here. Unhook the cables after you mark them. Mark this cable before you unplug it with the black marker. There's going to be silicone. You have to peel it away. Okay? Now this should lift right out. But here's what I want to show you. This is why you're going to need thermal paste. The stuff that they have in here is white. That does not matter the color. But they have thermal paste underneath this to help transfer heat from the heat sink to the casing. See that? So I'm going to clean all this up, and I'll reapply new thermal paste. Mine's actually gray, or I think it's gray, tan, it don't matter. But like I said, I'll post a link to that. But see the white? You can see it here. What you do is you put it on with either, you can use your finger or whatever, or a plastic knife or whatever. Put it on there when you go to assemble it, and that's going to help. This stuff helps transfer heat when a component is mounted to a piece of metal, the best way to also help it transfer heat is to use thermal paste. So that's what that's for. So, and there's probably going to be more inside of here, but I want to point this out before I started taking this all apart. So now I'm going to put you on pause, and we're going to go ahead and I'm going to remove the little screws in here on this cover, and we're going to show you that. So I'll be right back. Okay, I removed all the little screws. Now this cover shall come off, and there's going to be more. There's thermal paste. You see that? There's thermal paste on here, which comes in contact to here. That's probably where the final output transistor is that gives you the 10 watts output out of this module. Okay? So we got to make sure you clean this off with rubbing alcohol, clean it up with a Q-tip, and then put new thermal paste on when you reassemble this. Now, there's another thing I want to show you. There's a little part, little spacer you got to be mindful of right here. And I'll show you that. Let me set this down. It comes right out. Slides right in there. Okay? So just be aware of that. So now what we're going to do, let me kind of get my little towel here, lay it out again. Now what we're going to do is, depending on if you got to do repairs or any type of modification, if you can do it all from the top side, then you don't have to go any further. You can go ahead and do what you got to do on the top side without taking out the circuit board. Unfortunately, where I got to go is underneath the circuit board, and you cannot get to it on the other side. It's one solid piece. So it's going to look like I'm going to have to desolder these SMA connectors, take all these screws out, even the screw in the heat sink, and the screws over here, and this board should lift right out of there. And that's what it looks like. But I got to unsolder these. These are the on the SMA connectors, they are the center conductor. So we got to unsolder those. And I'm not going to have you sit there and watch me do all this. So I'm going to pause this video, and we're going to go ahead and do this, and I'll be right back. Okay, so now after you get the screws removed, now also be mindful, these screws are also ground. So when you go to put them in, tighten them up pretty snug. These are grounding points for the circuit board. So keep that in mind. Also, you are going to need, you're probably wondering, how did I desolder this right here? I use desolder braid, and I will show you what it is here in a minute. Well, maybe. Oh, here. Sorry about that. I've had this stuff for a long time. You know, it's so, don't mind it's copper, weave copper, and what you do is you take your, depending on your soldering iron, you set it on there, and you move the copper as it sucks away the solder. That's what I'll try to find a link. I've had this stuff for years, but I'll try to find a link to post down there. And obviously you're going to need solder, because then you're going to have to resolder, you know, these connectors back on to the circuit board. And I'm assuming you would have solder if you're going to do a repair or modification. But if you don't, you can look on eBay. You want rosin core solder. This is like, I've had this for years. Rosin core solder, not acid core. I'll repeat that again, not acid core. There is solder that they use for like plumbing, and there's solder they use for electronics. You want the electronic solder. Okay? So let's be mindful of that. Now I'm going to lift this board out of here. We're going to take it like this, kind of give it a little wiggle. And now the board's out. Set that there. Move that, and there is the board. And this is the back side of the board. So what I'm going to do, and of course the reason why I'm doing this, because as I did that one video, I want to see if a DB9 connector can be added to this. So I'm going to do some probing and some soldering. I'm going to have to solder some wires on. And what I'm going to do is, instead of trying to solder right on the chip itself, I'm going to trace it back to see if I can find a better solder point, because sometimes these little leads are really hard to solder to. So I got a magnifying glass, which I will be using. This is like a Drewer's magnifying glass. So I'm going to see if I can find, if I need like pin 1, I want to see if I can trace that back to another point on the board that might be easier to get to. But we're going to check it out and see what we can come up with. But this is how you take this board out if you need to do repairs or to do any modifications. So, and just reverse the process. But like I said, make sure that you make sure those screws are tight, they're grounding points, and don't forget about the heatsink compound. So there you have it. If you have any questions or comments, please post them down below. And I thank you, and please subscribe, and have a good day. I'd like to add too quick, on the other side of this, when we took this out, this is how it is. Here's the connector on top. Here's what we unsoldered. I also marked what sides transmit and receive, so I know what it is. Obviously on this side I still marked it, but this is a thermal pad. Do not remove this. This is a thermal pad. Instead of using the paste, there is a thermal pad that is used, so make sure you keep that on the circuit board. And this is the transmit side. This is the AT 1846S chip, but don't remove that thermal pad. That's why I make a quick mention of that. You want that to be on there. When you put it back inside of here, that thermal pad makes contact to the heatsink. That helps keeps this chip cool. And on the other side, remember, this is another heatsink that the cover actually touches. You can see there. So we want to make sure we put more heatsink compound on there when we put this all back together. So I just want to point that out real quick. So thank you. Have a good day, and please subscribe.